Hello everyone and welcome to episode 25, that's right, 25 of the Commando cast. I'm Andrew, flying solo today. I got my buddy Turbo here to help me out for as long as he'll stay up on the couch. So right now in Star Wars Destiny we have quite the disparity between hero and villain, so that's what I want to talk about today, is the villain-hero divide. So before we get into talking about the main topic, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about the week in Destiny. It's actually been a pretty big week in Destiny, largely because of this little guy, right? So this guy released last Thursday, about a week ago. Over the weekend, we did a draft on Saturday at Gongai, and then Mike at his Smuggler's Run Monday Night Dice event. They actually did something really cool. They did a sealed popper, is what they're calling it. So what they had done is, because they also own their online store, they had opened boxes until they pulled their legendaries from the box, and all the rest of the packs kind of went into a bin. And then for $8, we could come and we'd get 8 packs. So because we knew that they had non-legendaries in it, that's the popper version. So I don't want to go too in-depth on draft again because we've kind of already done that. But the draft kit itself, I think we were looking forward to it a lot from draft and helping to change it, but also on the flip side, it presented a whole lot of new challenges that I don't think I was prepared for. Primarily the fact that you have two 11-point characters in the kit really made it very dependent on how lucky you could get, basically in opening your character, even the 3 packs and then the second 3 packs you open, it's very dependent on how lucky you can get opening an 8 or a 9-point character. Just the way the math works out, right? Because the the Outer Rim Smuggler is also 10 points. So you have a 32-point team there, which granted you have the Allies of Necessity plot, which I didn't see anybody use all weekend. But without an 8-point character or a 9-point character, you're in deep trouble. So on the draft weekend, I got very unlucky. I ended up actually playing Dooku, Fenn Rau, the Shifter, and then I played the Astrogation plot and mainly went for Mill. That is one thing to note in this new format, is that Mill is actually a very real thing, right? That astrogation plot's worth probably 4 to 5 cards easy over the course of the game. So that certainly needs to be considered as something that you're going to see. It's a much more viable attack option as opposed to the, well, neither one of us is doing anything to each other, so that's what we're going to end up fighting for in the end, which is what we saw with the previous kit. Mill is actually a real attack opportunity here. So we have to make sure to watch for that. Also, Dooku, no secret, is really amazing. You're going to want to pair his saber with him because it's really crippling to have to lose those many cards. So, but not only is it just the turn he plays it, right? You also then have 2 discards on him. Plus, he has, with his saber, a lot of melee sides you have to deal with over the course of the game between the rerolls. So I think it's pretty much 100% that you have to go for Dooku first. Most people are playing Dooku just because that pairing is really incredible. It also gives you access to Sith and Leader, so you're going to see a lot of Dooku, and I think you absolutely have to kill him first. The other card I was really impressed with from a draft standpoint was the plot that is shadowed. So I'm showing it right here, but what Shadow does is when a character uses its power action or action, deals 1 indirect to that player. Fenn Rau and Dooku, at the very least, and the Outer Rim Smuggler as well, all have power actions on them. You're going to see people playing power actions throughout the tournament that you're playing in draft. So playing that plot for 0, yellow cost 0, is a huge value for your money. So if you can play yellow, you're absolutely packing that card. It does great work because it either makes them not use the action, which is actually pretty hurtful because it's either a card that you save, an indirect that you don't take, or rerolls, or they have to take the indirect doing it, and all damage counts, as we know in draft. Also, so I talked about Mill, talked about Dooku. Again, I was able to get K2SO on the popper sealed, and K2SO with hired muscle on the reroll is just gross, right? Being able to reroll the hired muscle and be guaranteed a 2, probably a 3, is pretty good. Overall, I was a little surprised with how kind of everything fit together. I was a little disappointed in my draft on Saturday that I couldn't get something other than the team. So while it of course is much more synergy with the new Convergent set with all the keywords that we all expected, there are a lot more new challenges, and I think it's going to take a couple sets to figure out exactly how this kit works exactly, right? So, right. So also with the release of this Allies of Necessity draft kit, it's kind of an exciting thing because it lets those of us who don't play on Tabletop Simulator finally have access to really the full meta that has been unfolding over the last couple weeks, right? The primary card in there obviously is Hired Muscle, right, which is going to fit into those Scoundrel decks. We highly anticipate kind of pulling the brakes off in our local meta. We think that there's been a lot of people who have been not playing the 3 wides because they're just waiting for everything to come together so they can play it. So we expect to see a lot more of those. I expect to see Vader come back to try to combat those 3 wides. Maybe we'll see some Leia come out to try to combat those as well. Another deck that I'm kind of excited to try is the Dooku Dooku Kylo, which is kind of funny if you think about it, right? Because like in Awakenings, Dooku Kylo was a deck, and now we've kind of come full circle, right? The problem I have when I'm listing this deck and where I want some viewer help from is I'm really nervous about that 21 points, right? Because Dooku only has the 9 health, and there's not a Force Illusion anymore, so what are we doing to suck up that damage? So that is my viewer question for the week, right? Is have you played Dooku Kylo? And if so, how are you doing? Is it as good as you thought? Is it excelling? Where does it fit, and what are your thoughts on it? So let us know, let me know, so I can look through it and get back to you on that. All right, so let's move into the main topic. It's been no secret that since the very beginning of this game, right, harkening all the way back to Awakenings, that Villain has had a pretty distinct advantage over Hero. In Awakenings, He Doesn't Like You was like the primary removal card for Villain, right? It's a 0 cost that lets you trade your worst die for their best die. Hero didn't have anything to match that. In Spirit of Rebellion, Lothcat and Mouse came out. But if you compare the two, it's really not a comparison because it's trading your best die for their best die versus your worst die for their best die. So Villain had that advantage. We also have the comparison I'm showing here now of Doubt versus Confidence. Doubt is still an ubiquitous card. Confidence is a very good card, but it has to be used smartly, and it's just not quite as good. And then fast forward even to this new set, Convergence. We have this blue 0 drops, Forsaken versus Upper Hand, right? Forsaken is, granted, it's not completely ubiquitous, right? You just can't, it's just not free removal, you have to be smart about it, but it can just remove a die, period, right? The Upper Hand, not only do you have to have it's essentially a double restriction. You have to have a 2 cost or more, and they have to have a 0 that actually matters enough for you to care to remove it. Right, so Forsaken again is way better, and in each of these 3 cases we've seen Villain be better. Right, so and I don't even really want to go into the whole Vader's Fist, Mega Blasters. Scoundrel plot or the Scoundrel support can be used for anybody, but again, Villain has really just the money to get him out better. So what I really want to talk about on the reason that I think Villain continues to be so much more dominant than Hero. And again, I want to be very clear. As history's gone on, we did have that brief period around Worlds last year where we saw several Hero decks. We saw Sabine, we saw Stairs, which was Rey, profitable, and Ayla before Ayla got nerfed. And even today we're seeing some Hero decks out there. So I'm not saying Hero can't be played, but I don't think that there's a very hard argument to make that Villain has significant advantages. And again, it's not just those supports. I think it really boils down to the pure plethora of 0 cost control options that Villain have that Hero doesn't, right? So what I'm showing here is just a breakdown. Obviously, Hidden Motive can be played on both sides. Doubt is still around, whereas even Confidence has rotated out. We have Forsaken versus Upper Hand that we already talked about. Sinister Piece, I know some people don't like that card. That card I think is pretty strong, right? But still, it gives you the option. It's a 0 cost plus another from your hand. So there's 2 net value there, but you get to remove a die that's 2 or more. And it's a completely unrestricted die other than the 2 or more value. We also have Measure for Measure, which is on both sides, but I want to make sure that's accounted because, again, I think that by and large, the villains have it's a little easier for the villains to get worthless trooper die into the pool. I know that both sides have a lot of troopers, but as far as the worthless side goes, that extra one from the Mega Blasters is well worth trading your die that's potentially showing a blank for an unrestricted removal of their die. And then I also have Probe on the villain side of the list. I realize that's not removal, but the things that Probe can do when you're like mid to late game, just stripping them out and letting you flip a whole bunch of dice is pretty gross. Heroes do have Pacify, which is great, but of course there's a trade-off there. If you do use to remove their die, they get 2 value out of it. And really Pacify, I think, is, with the exception of Mill, it's really not as versatile as almost anything on the villain side. And then we already talked about Upper Hand. It's useful, it's great, it's actually kind of useful, it's not great, but has its purpose. So I think this is really what's boiling it down. Now, again, I want to be clear, there are still some hero decks out there, but some of the more broken hero decks, or broken, quote-unquote broken hero decks that we're talking about these days, really are trying to take advantage of villain decks, right? The one out there that I can tops to mind is the Yoda, Infus Nest Marauder, and then Jawa AR, right? To try to get either Fist down through the Marauder's ability of packing that, or you can do the Fire Spray, or you can even just try to do Shadowcaster, right? So what we're looking at in both of those is you're actually looking at using something that villains just regularly have access to try to cheat. So again, I still don't know that it's inherently as efficient. I realize that the Yoda flipping helps, and of course that Astromech droid, that's really the advantage of the whole reset part. But again, the villains just really have access to the better toys right now, not only just from a support standpoint, but also from a zero cost removal standpoint. All right, so really what this all boils down to is just that the majority of things that Hero can do, aside from Mill, Villain does better, right? And I actually have to take that back, because if you look at some of the videos up on the Commando cast recently, Derek DeJager's deck flying around with that 3-wide Villain Leader Mill is a nasty little deck. So aside from kind of your quote-unquote jankier type decks on Hero, I really think that the majority of it gets done better on the villain side. Take Padme Saw, for example, and compare that to Tarkin Snoke. Padme Saw is definitely a little more aggressive, but it's a lot less consistent. And Tarkin Snoke can pump out and has access to all the big toys like Mega Blasters and Fist. And it can turn worthless die into damage, whereas Padme Saw needs to roll into it or somehow control into it. So that right there is a great example, right? One of the better hero decks out there, or I should say more popular hero decks out there right now, has a villain counterpart that I think does it better. Again, aside from the Mill arguments, I don't know that there's a whole lot that Hero does that Villain can't do, at least as good, if not better, right? So I guess the question is, where do we go from here, right? Is there anything that can be done? We spent a whole week on Blue Hero trying to get it better. I think most people agree that the Blue Hero decks probably need to kind of wait until the next meta. They're okay. They're not great. Let's look at another example, right? We have right now the Qui-Gon Satine Bandolier deck, and they're calling it Hero Palp, right? It's nasty. It's a nasty little deck, but it's Hero Palp because it's basically using cards to try and do what Palp does naturally, right? So again, we're kind of running the situation that aside from the yellow, because I think you want to run Watt with Palpatine, aside from the yellow access and kind of some of the hero tricks, I think Villain still does the majority of it better. So yeah, that's pretty much where we sit with Hero and Villain right now. Hopefully that can kind of shift. I mean, again, it's always been kind of a thing that's been present in Destiny. From time to time it's ebbed and flows, but right now it very much feels very strong in the Villain favor from a uber competitive standpoint. I would, however, on the flip side, but this is my personal playstyle, I'd probably argue that more of the hero decks are more fun right now. That Kess Dameron Rex shoot 'em up guns deck seems pretty fun, and there's some other hero variant decks that are worth playing. But so yeah, let me know what you think, what you're looking forward to playing. Again, if you like what we're doing here on the Dice Commando channel, please give us a like, a subscribe, it goes a long way. We do also say hit the bell, but I want to make sure that people understand that subscribing and hitting the bell are actually two different things. So if you are belled, but you're not subscribed, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and help us get our user count up. So other than that, thank you for sticking with us for 25 episodes. It's really great we've been able to do it this long, and we thank you guys for watching. Go Commando.